getting the all-important consumer buy-in. That's what we're here to talk about. And the last panel touched on it a little bit with Joe from Wendy's even commented that even though we communicate all throughout the supply chain, sometimes we don't even know what the consumer wants. So I am going to do both what Ellen and Amy did, because I think it's a great idea, and I'm going to make each of our panelists introduce themselves, where you're from, your title, and a little bit about yourself and how you got into the industry, because I think it's important for everybody to know a little bit about you. So, Lenny?
My name is Lenny DeGeorge. I'm the executive chef for concept development for the Walt Disney Parks and Resorts. We handle domestic properties and also do some international support. I can tell you that I am the envy of everybody in the company. I have the best job on property, and they will all tell you that I don't have to. I got started in this business. I worked a couple jobs in high school. Actually, one of them was for my father, who was a school teacher. So to make some actual money, he did some catering on the side. Loved teaching, but he needed to pay the bills. That was my baptism into the food industry. From there, I went to Johnson & Wales in Providence, Rhode Island, and was recruited by Walt Disney World out of Johnson & Wales. So it's been my only professional job.
I'm Gerry Ludwig. I'm the corporate consulting chef for Gordon Foodservice, which is the fourth largest broadline distributor in the nation. We're a $10 billion company. We're also coast to coast in Canada. But even though we're a very large company today, we are still family owned and operated. The Gordon family, the Gordons are in their corner offices on a daily basis. And so we provide food service products to virtually any type of operator, from the commercial side to non-commercial hospitals, colleges, universities, things like that. We also operate over 100 what we call our marketplace stores, which are kind of a combined retail and a place for our customers to fill in their orders. I always knew that I wanted to be a chef from a very young age. My mother and maternal grandparents came to America in the late 20s from Germany, and so as a little kid, my grandparents taught me German cooking long before I went to culinary school. First dish that I ever made was braised spinach with bacon and barley. So who'd ever thunk that the first thing I ever cooked was actually veg-centric? Then friends of the family owned an Italian restaurant. So I was able to weasel my way onto the hot line when I was 15, still kind of underage for actually cooking in a restaurant. But I was basically retherming spaghetti and saucing it and things like that. Graduated from high school midterm, so I was able to immediately go into culinary school at 17, graduated when I was 18, became an executive chef at 22, and as I was nearing my 30s, I started looking at corporate opportunities, sat down with the Gordons. I was a customer of Gordon Foodservice, sat down with them and proposed a consulting chef program to them. Took a lot of years for that to actually evolve into the program that we have today, but today the culinary R&D department at Gordon Foodservice, I believe, is unique in food service distribution because of our research MO, the way that we go about analyzing trends and creating resources for our customers. The competition just really is not doing that. So.
My name is McKenna. I'm the Director of Food Service and Marketing for the National Watermelon Promotion Board. I've been with the Promotion Board for 2 years, but previous to that I was with the National Mango Board for about 8 years. I was working for Historical Society of Central Florida, and I got a phone call from a friend that was looking for a marketing person to work on a new mango promotion group. And at first I thought it was the clothing company. It was not. And I went and interviewed and got the job. And from the beginning, the mango industry knew food service was an important part of the business. And so I was able to start the food service program there, as well as build the program and the brand. And then I decided to move into an industry that 25 years into the board's existence decided to start a food service program. So it's been an interesting opportunity, both educating the industry about the value of food service for that industry, but also educating the food service industry on a product that's been around for a very long time, but new ways to use it and new ways to bring it to U.S. consumers.
Hello, I'm Darryl Mickler. I'm the Senior Director, Corporate Executive Chef for Hard Rock International. In that role, I head up all food and beverage development for all of our cafes around the world, as well as work on everything else, food related, whether it's new kitchen design, line design, as well as some of the operational aspects associated with our executive chef teams and our kitchen manager teams throughout the world. Oddly enough, I spent the first 15, 17 years of my career with having a great time with Walt Disney World. Actually, I think Lenny and I, we were in the same traditions class. As we started right about the same time. So, a great grounding there, and then I've had other great experiences both in similar senior development roles with both Brinker, Aramark, and Darden. So, and happy to be here. Thanks for the invitation.
I'm Don Odiorne. I'm the Vice President of Foodservice and our website and social media for the Idaho Potato Commission. I've been there a long time, since 1987. Prior to that, with the California Lettuce Commission, Iceberg Lettuce Commission. So with PLOT, plot, potatoes, lettuce, onions, and tomatoes, I have represented 2 of the major categories. Started out with my interest in food service, riding in the front seat or in the back of a station wagon. That is what existed before minivans. Going across country with my parents, my dad loved to travel, and he was a geologist, and so he would be on a well and get a lot of vacation time. So we would spend 3 months going someplace. I was always envious of other kids because they had Italian grandmothers or Jewish family members, and I thought I was left out. My dad was from the Boston, Massachusetts area, and my mom was from Alabama. And a little later on, I realized that there was a rich history in cooking in the Southeast and the Northeast that I got exposed to over that time period. University of Denver graduate, hotel and restaurant management. I started out with a company called, started out in country clubs, and then I started out with, went from there to a company called Saga Foodservice. I was there. That's a company that no longer exists. Part of it was bought by Marriott, but I was there at a really instrumental time when they added a whole restaurant division, and it included things like Velvet Turtle and Stuart Anderson's Black Angus and Straw Hat Pizza and so on and so forth. And I left there, went to Round Table Pizza, then went out on my own with a fresh pasta restaurant that was a little early, ahead of the trends in the early 80s, late 70s. From there into pizza, and then from there into the marketing with the role that I have now.
Thanks, Don.
Hi everyone, I'm Shane Shaibly, corporate chef for First Watch Restaurants. We have about almost 200 First Watches and just over 100 Egg and I restaurants across the country. So 300 all in. I've been with the company for about 2.5 years and started out in the industry like many of us at 14 years old, and you're not legally supposed to be in the industry, but it gets in your blood, and that's part of the fun. So started out at 14 and knew this is what I wanted to do. Went to culinary school and worked at the Ritz-Carlton on South Beach for a little while, and came back home to Tampa, worked at a fine dining restaurant there, and at 25 got into the corporate world, corporate chef for the Melting Pot and a couple other brands under that umbrella. Very fortunate to travel around the country, spent 7 years with that company, and then came to First Watch. So it's a pleasure to be up here with everyone.
Thanks everybody very much. As you know, the panel is about consumer buy-in. But we're also going to touch a little bit on internal buy-in too, because that's a big part of new menu items, whether they're produce or not. So I'm going to ask this question to have Darryl, Shane, and Lenny each talk to us a little bit about, in your menu development process for new produce items, at what point in the operation does in the process does the consumer get involved, whether it's focus groups or panels, testing, and then how does that influence what happens on the menu? So consumer involvement in your menu process. Lenny?
Yeah, I think the most interesting consumer insight we ever did was right before we opened Be Our Guest restaurant, which is in the Magic Kingdom. And the insight wasn't so much around French food, not what you'd equate to a theme park, especially not the Magic Kingdom, perhaps Epcot, but we got to really dig deep into the kids' perspective. And we did a focus group where we had on camera parents next to a table full of their children and ask the same questions, kind of what would the kids be interested in eating and then what they did eat, and then ask the parents what they thought their child would say. And you'd be amazed to find out that it was the direct opposite. Whatever they thought the parents thought the kids would react to or not react to, it did not happen. They had some thoughts on vegetables. They liked them when they were crunchier, or you know, certain menu items resonated better than others. But the most interesting thing that we took away from that was just parents think they know what the kids want, and you know, when they talk about my child will only eat chicken nuggets, hot dogs, and burgers, you know, that's a product of how they were grown up, how they were brought up, and how they were raised. So one of the things that we've done over the last 5 years is really put that vegetable choice or that fruit choice in front. We actually make them opt out of carrots or grapes or apple wedges and choose the French fries. And so there's a choice, and it doesn't mean that the potato is bad, but it kind of raises them that the vegetable is not bad. And that kind of has, I know I've got plenty of adult colleagues and friends that would say, I don't eat any vegetable, I'm just meat and potato. They're not food service people, but there's a lot of people out there that feel that way.
That's great. Darryl, how does your company incorporate the consumer's opinion in the menu process?
We go after a couple of different ways. I think one way to start with is it really drives a lot of the ideation pieces that comes up. So we are continually collecting, you know, consumer insights and consumer voice through a number of different channels, both directly through survey tools that are out there for consumers, you know, feedback we get on a regular basis from our managers and from our franchise owners. So that piece is always in there as we do the ideation piece. And as we're experimenting with the new items, we'll go after it a number of different ways, from, you know, independent panels that we'll pull in, but then, you know, also, you know, small restaurant tests where you know, it's relatively easy for me to get into 2 or 3 restaurants, you know, around the world and put a new item in place, you know, drop surveys on a pretty consistent basis, or get in there and do table talks as well, and talk to consumers on a really direct basis, and I think that gives it a real immediacy to it that I like.
Right, so you use the same process in the U.S. because you have a lot of units all over the world, globally.
We do. You know, same process of extracting information.
Got it.
Information, you know, can often be different.
Yes, I'm sure. Shane, how does your company incorporate
Yeah,
consumers?
we do it more in a grassroots way, I would say. We're a little bit younger as far as our LTO program. So we started doing LTOs maybe 6 years ago, and I would say it really hit its stride like 3 years ago. And because we're still relatively small and nimble, I mean, we test all of our menus. We have 11 restaurants in the Tampa, Florida market. So we test everything in Tampa first. We're 1 full year ahead in LTO testing. So, I mean, we get up, and I say we, you know, our president, our CEO, myself, our VP of Ops, get into those restaurants on a regular basis and sit next to customers. And, I mean, the old school way, right? Listen to what they're saying. And, you know, we found that provides us with so much insight. I mean, it really helps to spend a week in a restaurant or 5 days or whatever it is and listen. And as that LTO goes through its life cycle, right, usually about 10 weeks, by the time it's over, you'll see sales jump in the beginning and then they'll start to taper off. But if you're in that restaurant and you're constantly talking to the servers and helping them to communicate to the customer, you don't see that taper. I mean, if the servers continue to be excited about it, then the customers continue to be excited about it. And then we use, obviously, you know, any tweaks that need to be done based on presentation or operations or things like that, we take from that test and then implement before we roll nationwide the next year. So it's a lot more in there, right? Get in there and listen and talk to those
eavesdropping.
customers.
I like that.
Yeah,
That's good.
yeah.
That's good. All right, well, then let's switch to the commodity representatives. How about Don and Megan? So I know both of you are very food service focused, but I also know that you partner with a lot of these types of organizations here. Can you give the audience some examples of how you've partnered with operators and chains, but had a consumer focus to it? Megan,
Can we start off?
Megan, you should start.
Okay. So a great example of a partnership we have is actually with First Watch. We, you know, at the Watermelon Board, we we know that health isn't first, but there is a great benefit to talking about those immediate needs that are met with certain products from a health perspective. So with watermelon comes hydration and water. So when Shane and I were talking about kind of interesting things that consumers might find interesting, they have a piece on their LTO menu insert that highlights one of the products in that LTO. And so we talked about the benefits that watermelon can add, and one of our big benefits from an immediate need for consumers is hydration. One big slice of watermelon is like drinking a glass of water, and you don't need to know about vitamin A and vitamin C and what those can do for your body. It's a very easy, knowledgeable piece about watermelon. And it's an obvious, but a lot of people don't think about it. So we were able to include that very quick factoid about watermelon on the LTO menu insert. So that was a great way to be very consumer facing, but also highlighting a really great product on their menu, which was actually a fresh juice that used watermelon. So again, just a great way to highlight not only their creativity and product, but also watermelon.
Great, thanks. Dawn?
One of the ways that we've tried to work with chains that's been very successful for us here recently is what I'd call a modern steakhouse, or is referred to as a modern steakhouse. With the price of beef and some of the other protein items going up so much, what we came to find out was that the reliance on side dishes, on appetizers, on desserts is really tremendous. And so what we've tried to do is go back and reinvent or rethink the basics, the mashed, baked, hash browns or rosti, French fries. And in doing that, we're able to offset those costs and get people to increase the menu sides to actually create a potato section. Potatoes are really economical, but if they can be positioned in a new and fresh way, whether it's roasted or braised or global ingredients, that's really helped. And I think the one thing that we've learned in that process in reaching out to chains is how important it is to know their chain, to do the homework, and to get into their kitchens, and to realize that, especially with a modern steakhouse, the oven is a very critical piece of real estate. And do they want to devote that to baking rolls off or baking potatoes off, or do they want to be able to put a protein in there that they can get a premium price for? So we've had to kind of think differently about that. And the same with a French fryer. Quite often, that particular piece of equipment, there are never enough of them in most casual dining restaurants. They're already overtaxed. And so the ideas that we might have to come in and say, here's a great new thing that you can put through your fryer, we just get a blank stare from them. It's like, that's not going to work unless you can show us what we can take away. And so it's been that extra effort of working with a chain, especially working with the corporate chefs and getting in the kitchens and actually experiencing what they're experiencing has made us a lot more effective.
Okay, great, thanks. Let's turn to Chef Gerry, because you inspired us all the time when we drool and look at your pictures and hear what you've just been doing. So I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about translating all those things that you see back to volume food service for the customers that Gordon works with, and then does that tie, how does that also tie to consumer trends that you're seeing too?
Well, similar to the boards and commissions, being a distributor, we are an additional layer away from the consumer. And so, particularly at Culinary R&D, our primary tasks are, number one, to arm and enable the street-level consultants to work with our customers, to make sure that they're helping them be as successful as possible, because we truly put our heads on the chopping block. When we take these trends and create resources around it. We're going to our customers and saying, these are the sort of things that you want to have on your menu. Most of the time it starts as an LTO. You know, we're not telling the place this permanently on your menu because you do want to have menu trial. So it is in our mission statement that the way to maximize efficacy for our company is to provide unfettered access to the information and resources that we collect and disseminate at Culinary R&D at our home office. We have 24 street-level chefs as well as 24 what we call business solutions specialists that work directly with our customers on not only menu and recipe development, but also front of the house, which would include waitstaff training and things like that. Once again, the information that you saw this morning, if that lived and died with me, that would not be a very good use of Gordon Food Service resources. So what we've created, we call our ATR, and it just stands for Annual Trends Report, and it is a completely proprietary online resource for use by all of our street-level implementers, as well as our sales force. Once again, the key to success is unfettered access within the company. And this is very safely behind firewalls, so the competition can't get at it. And it involves several resources, but the primary, the ATR resource, what we do is we take the trends, and we actually have 60 different modules. We have a wide range of customers, and so some of them are very, some of the modules are very mainstream. It's, you know, entree steaks, produce, vegetables. Veg-centric kind of goes up a layer because it's more leading edge. And so we have mainstream, we have leading edge modules, about 60 of them that really cover all of the different menu opportunities. And within that, we primarily show the street level examples, like what I presented to you today, because what we want to do for our operators is to validate that opportunity. If we're saying that sunchokes are growing on menus, we want to show them why we're saying that. And so we show the street level example, but once again, to help our street level implementers you know, really absorb all of the information. You have the slide, you have the name of the restaurant and location, but then we also put in an additional text box which talks about what was in that dish and why we thought that it was relevant. Then we have audio tracks that they can tap into if they want to drill down even further. And so that really helps them to collect that information. So along with the street level example will be the Gordon Food Service kitchen tested recipe that we have developed to assist that. So there's an icon, they click on the icon, it takes them directly to the recipe. And so that is the primary resource that we use for going directly to our customers and helping them with that menu and recipe development.
Great, very extensive, thank you. Let's talk a little bit about the other customer, your internal customers, and how that buy-in works, and maybe how it doesn't work sometimes. Any problems or challenges they have? Shane, do you want to start with this one a little bit, and your menu development process, your internal glitches, perhaps?
Yeah, I mean, there's always challenges, right? That's what I think makes our job fun, is we have to be able to figure out how to overcome those challenges. For us, some that come to mind, you know, when you hear about trends and you look at the trends report and you see, you know, items on the far left-hand side that normally chains are a little bit leery of, right? They're scared to be out on that cutting edge. We take the opposite approach. We want to take that chance, and we're willing to gamble a little bit. Most times, knock on wood, that gamble has paid off for us. Our fresh juice program is a fantastic example. And today, you know, we're juicing carrots, Fuji apple, kale, cucumber in-house. Right now, we have a seasonal juice that has turmeric and beets in it as well. So it's great when it works, but sometimes you know you're going to hit a snag, and that item is going to either not test very well, or it sells okay, but the consumer feedback isn't great. And we actually turn a lot to social media, and we listen to the chatter and see what people are taking pictures of. And you know, in some cases, maybe a dish it sells okay, it's on the average scale for us, but the chatter around it and the shares and the Instagrammability, that's a word, of that dish, like that's great. You know, that brings us down a whole different road. And so it's not always just about, you know, looking at sales and saying, hey, this killed it. Look at the numbers on it. It's really about relevance and our people talking about it. And for us as a chain, like that's almost equally as important as those sales numbers. So it's good to be on the front end of the trends and on the cutting edge.
Yeah, definitely. Okay. Darryl, how about your internal process and any challenges throughout the process?
There's you know, challenges inherent with any, you know, organization or process, and I'd say probably the biggest challenge that I've found in most organizations is really knowing when you're the consumer and when you're not the consumer, and that okay, I'm creating something that represents what I as wherever I am in the organization might genuinely like, versus knowing who the consumer is, and that requires, I think, really robust discussions all the time of okay, here's what we're designing it for, here's who our target is, and here are how all these elements around the concept line up against it. So really keeping not only internal customers aligned with that, but also keeping yourself aligned to that, and really recognizing when you have to step outside of yourself and you're developing something that's very specifically targeted. And I think most folks understand that, but it's one of those things that you're always talking about and always reminding everyone about why you're doing this and who it's for, and what the research around them shows that why it solves these solutions, or why it tracks to a particular trend within a particular demographic or a particular nationality. In our case, we very well be looking for something that is a great vegetarian dish, but it really needs to work well in India. I'm not so concerned about some other areas of the world with that particular item. So they can be targeted for different people that may not be directly in front of you.
Right,
at the time.
personal preferences versus what the consumers are interested in all over the world. So, Lenny, some of the challenges that you face internally?
I think the biggest challenge that we've overcome internally is that, unlike everybody else, we're not primarily a food and beverage company. So when we come up with a new concept, whatever that might be, from a kiosk all the way up to a fine dining restaurant, the levels of approval that are involved, eventually you hit people that just aren't foodies. That becomes a big challenge. So we built up a lot of trust, and they understand that we are the experts. So we have the ability to try things now that are a lot more aggressive than ever before, and that's a great feeling. And they also know that we have the ability to change and adapt to whatever's there. I was talking at dinner last night. We now have a whole fried fish that has a green papaya som tam, which is peanuts and fish sauce and all these other flavorful elements in the middle of a theme park, which is a big step for us. The same restaurant also has charred octopus with salsa fee as its #1 selling appetizer. So we're getting there, and even our kiosk, we have green papaya carrot slaw on 2 different kiosk items that if you think back 3 years ago, would I have told you those would be successful ingredients, I'd be a little bit leery.
Yeah.
Susan, let me jump in real
Sure.
quick. One of the things that we face as commodity boards is our bosses, and they are typically, as you were just mentioning, Lenny, not foodies. And we do try and get them out to conferences and food shows and get them into restaurants beyond the chains that are in their hometown. The chef's calendar that we work on, it's a large line item because it goes out to the entire audience of Plate Magazine. And it's always one that comes up for, gee, do we really have to do that? Would somebody really miss it if we didn't do it for a year because we've got a tight year and things like that? And one of the smartest things we did about 6 or 7 years ago was actually design a survey and sent that out to chefs. And this last time we cut off the responses at 860. And so we try and ask questions like, did it drive you to the website? Did you hang up the calendar? Are you actually using it? Referring to the food service conference dates that are there. We've tried to make it more of a benefit beyond just the recipes, but having key dates there and having quotes from the chefs, so on and so forth. And so when we get numbers back that are in the 85% and up positive, it's just an easier sell internally to do that. And what I found a lot of times that we can offer, and Megan and I can offer when we go in is, you guys as chefs and gals as chefs are the experts, but sometimes, you're hitting that wall continually and you have to kind of pick and choose what fights you're going to do.
we see it within our own four walls, and you know, I think that's one of the most exciting parts of our business. Because we are breakfast, brunch, and lunch only, we're only open 7 a.m. to 2:30 p.m. The PPA is lower in the $11 to $12 range, so it encourages people to dine with us more often. And now you get to see balance within, you know, one family coming multiple times per month. So it's nice.
That's great. That's great. Question back to trends for Gerry. You focus so heavily on what's going on in restaurants, but how about do you do much digging into consumer trends? And I know you're seeing what's on the menu, but are you taking a look at what consumers are talking about on social media, what they're interested in, and then translate that back to your customers?
Well, I think it's really the job of our business solutions director to follow those sort of things. I mean, he is a guru on demographics and what it is that you know that people are looking for as far as dining consumers. You know, on our end, you know, we truly find that the vast majority of the innovation on menus is being driven by chefs in independent commercial restaurants. I mean, the vast majority of what you saw today, you know, these are chefs that they own their own restaurant. They're helping to drive the innovation. So on the culinary side, we really focus, you know, much more on flavor rather than, you know, what it is that. In other words, it's more of a push to the consumer as opposed to a pull. And you know, and the opportunities really do vary by segment. Because once again, we distribute to all types of customers. You know, if we're selling to, you know, college and university, we have a lot more of an opportunity to market fresh, to market healthy, as opposed to our full-service commercial operators, because we do know statistically that the full-service dining experience for the vast majority of consumers is actually a very infrequent dining experience. You know, QSR, full service, they still, the research companies still haven't broken it out between QSR like Wendy's and McDonald's and fast casual like a Chipotle and a Qdoba. But I mean, we know that the average American dines in that type of restaurants about 3.5 times a week. Now, the burger type QSRs they've always been challenged marketing more produce and marketing more healthy things on menus. But if you take a look at what happens with fast casual, you know, even though they're not really, most of them are not overtly marketing healthy on the menu via produce, but you know, because it carries that healthy halo, you know, the consumers are really, you know, just kind of brought along. You know, whereas when we're consulting to our commercial operators, and we are talking to them very, very heavily about vegetable centricity, because it is such a huge opportunity. You know, we know through 40 years of NPD statistics that the vegetarian and vegan community is usually right about 3.5% of the population, and vegetable centricity is appealing to the other 96.5% of dining consumers who would eat more vegetables in restaurants if they had the more compelling flavors. And that really is the message that we take to our commercial operators.
Okay, that makes sense. There is a subject I want to make sure we touch on before we run out of time, and it's something everyone, I think, could comment on. The last panel, there was a lot of agreement on communication, transparency, understanding all of your partners throughout the supply chain. So I want to talk a little bit about consumer perceptions and education and how you might deal with those challenges, in specifically to do with I think we've all talked about that health messaging in particular isn't necessarily the way to go as long as you're offering a lot of healthy options. But what about organic messaging and the whole subject of local? I don't think consumers understand what that means and what goes into getting their produce on the plate. So I think if you could each touch on educating consumers, organic and or local, whatever you want to touch on. But I think, you know, how do you deal with misconceptions and educating consumers, or are you able to from where you sit?
Well, I'll say farm to table or local is a lot easier in California than it is in Florida. But in Florida, we deal with mostly that farm to table type, you know, messaging. We want them to know that we know where it's coming from. We've sourced great ingredient, and we've treated it the best way possible, more than it's organic or, you know, lying to them and tell them it came from down the street, because In Florida, that's just not possible. But it's more about knowing the story behind the ingredient, making a great choice on how you use it on the menu, and being passionate about how you sell it to them.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. And food safety comes into play here too. So
Absolutely.
that they, farm to table, as long as you have that relationship with the farmers and they understand that you know where the product's coming from.
Correct.
What do you think, Gerry?
I can tell you as a distributor, we're constantly hammered with requests for local. And I think we've really created a great balance in the minds of our operators as far as, what that opportunity. I can tell you, we haven't really seen a huge opportunity with organic. We really haven't seen huge growth in that area. But as far as local is concerned, we've developed a lot of great relationships with various farmers within our markets that can not only provide great local products, but can provide them in a food safe way. Because that, for a large distributor, that we have to have those protocols in place to make sure that the produce is safe. But basically, what we tell our operators, and we're pretty blunt with them, it's like, you do have to understand that if everybody ate locally, the earth would, the majority of the population of the planet would starve. It is, commercially farmed produce that, the Salinas Valley, it's a bread basket, and they supply produce to the entire country and a good part of the world. So naturally, you're going to have industrially farmed produce as the core on your menu. But for instance, some of the crudité presentations that you saw this morning, that they have the smaller vegetables, the rough cuts, all of this that so speak to local and so speak to fresh. We tell our customers, knowing darn well that it's business coming out of our pockets, that the best reason in the world to visit your local farmers market would to get some of these heirloom local heirloom produce products that you can take and just scrub them up, leave them untrimmed, to make a beautiful crudité presentation, and that can be part of your menu where the local really makes sense. Same thing with tomatoes in the summertime and things like that. Of course, we have a huge amount of business in Michigan. The local apples, when they come in, we have all sorts of things that we do around those. So it's really creating that balance between demand for local and what is actually practical and executable.
Megan, I know you're passionate about this too, because we both visited a school food service operation recently, so maybe you'd want to talk a little bit about educating people about the things.
So from an organic perspective, it's very small watermelon organic crop. There is not very much organic watermelon out there. But from a local perspective, we hear often, watermelon is a summertime fruit, and watermelon is served in the summertime. And we visited a school district, and they don't serve watermelon except for when it's available and when it's available in their area. But when the Watermelon Board came to be 25 years ago, there were no importers on our board. And we are getting ready to go through a redistricting cycle with our board because we have to add more importers because we're not fairly representing the crop right now with the amount of people represented on our board. So although people are saying local, 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 we are approaching 40% of the volume of watermelon sold in the United States comes from outside of the country. And that's for a crop that's traditionally been known as a summertime fruit. So I think that people are very attuned to the local message, but I think what they're actually buying can tell a different story. And I think that there is a lot to be said for the transparency and knowing where it's coming from and not trying to trick people and saying, it's December and of course this is grown domestically, but being honest and factual about where that product is coming from and the fact that it still has a great flavor, a great texture, and is a great product. Because there's something to be said for the continuity of seeing a product in the store year round that keeps it top of mind. So I think that as with most of the things that we all consume and wear and purchase, I think that there's valuable pieces to having some products available year round for consumers to enjoy.
Good. How does Hard Rock deal with consumer messaging that may or may not be on target?
Well, so to the extent of local organic and things along those lines, first and foremost, you have continuity, consistency, and safety, and safety being certainly foremost when we're thinking about any type of any type of product line, whether that's produce-based, protein-based, what have you. So that's a big piece there. And as we are in a lot of different areas, certainly a lot of tourism areas, but around the world, we do make allowances for localization of our menu. There's a menu positioning on there to make a burger local, and also work very closely with our executive chefs that run the individual restaurants of, okay, how relevant is a local message to the clientele that are coming in? Because in some places, particularly internationally, folks might come into a Hard Rock a couple of times a month versus in the U.S. you might come a couple of times a year when you're traveling. So in those areas, there's certainly a much greater focus and need to talk to items within the local community and reflect local flavors. So we do like to reflect local flavors, particularly on the fruit side, around desserts and around some of the salads, throughout the year. So long and short answer is it varies, I suppose. And even organic, while is not as big a conversation as it had been in years past, it still pops up in certain areas of the world, though I don't get as much attention to that in the U.S. anymore.
Oh, that's more in other parts of the world versus the U.S. Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. Don, how about organic and local for your world?
Yeah, we like the word locale.
Locale,
And
okay.
terroir, and we work with the chain Elevation Burger and continue to try and source. They want organic potatoes for their French fries. And, potatoes sprout after 3 months, and so in order to find a year-round supply of organic potatoes, then purchasing people don't get very excited about that because they've got to reach out to multiple states, and they've got to reach out to multiple suppliers and so on and so forth. And one of the things we've prided ourselves over the years on is the ability to harvest a crop once a year and be able to store it and be able to sell it 11 months later. I do want to jump in and do a push for food bloggers, because we were talking a little bit about consumers and how it relates a little bit to this. As we work with over 100 food bloggers. One of the things that we've done with custom recipes, and we've got 450 custom recipes from them. We've got some food bloggers that do vlogging, and we've got some where they've got 2.5 million views of a particular dish. We started working with them after I started a post on our website called Dr. Potato, which is potato tips, and we started that in 2009. What we try and do with the food bloggers is get some really influential ones to get our message out. Initially, I thought, gee, what a great trade. You give me a recipe that uses potatoes in a unique way or incorporates a new spice, a twist on an existing classic, and so on and so forth. And then I give you an audience on our website. And what I quickly found was they were of more value to me and have become our advocates. And so we bring them up for harvest tours. We've done that for the last 5 years. We did a kind of a fun thing. Everybody that goes to culinary school knows that when you're in those first classes of basic knife skills and you're working with potatoes and carrots and onions and tomatoes, part of it is because it's cheap. All those items can be cut up and then incorporated into something or even tossed, but you haven't taken like a steak and cut it wrong, and all of a sudden you got 6 ounces and 9 ounces. So we did an interesting thing just here recently. We called it Idaho Potato Cuts Class, and we brought in 20 food bloggers, and we did a knife skills thing with potatoes and videotaped it. And the whole idea behind it was to bring in people that are doing videos and posting them on YouTube, and have them become more skilled. And so we got Booz, the cutting boards, to supply those. We got Wurstoff to supply the knives. We had 2 chefs. Some of you may know Chris Kotke from Kendall College, and he's with another group that does international. And then, of course, Chef Dave Woolley. And what we did was do the knife skills, had everybody cut everything, then we made those into recipes, and so they could see a direct application of doing a potato risotto or a Hasselback potato or a scallop potato dish with different cheeses to bring it out of that normal scallop potato. And then in the afternoon, we did potato salads, and we had like you would do with a chef's competition, mystery basket, but we had probably 40 items and divided them into teams, and each person then picked something like the lobster to make then a potato salad. They took the only lobster, so then nobody else can do that. So it really made it a stretch for them to figure out what do they do, but they use those skills. And now the posts that they're doing are very complimentary to, this is how we're incorporating potatoes into our menus for our evenings, whether it's Sunday supper with the family or a special occasion.
That's great. That's interesting. Now, so Shane, how does First Watch communicate with consumers about things like organic or local?
Yeah, so two different questions, right? On the organic side, just this past September, we have all, say, 196 of our First Watch restaurants using organic spring mix. That is the only organic item that we're using right now. We wanted to put it out there and see what that does, see if it generates any chatter. We feel like the quality is better. Maybe it's just in my head, but I really do. I feel like it tastes better, and it performs a little bit better because there's not as many people using it today. I feel like we're getting it through the distributors faster, and it's only coming to us or us and one other chain. So that's the only thing we're doing now on the organic side. And then on the other, what was the other part? I'm sorry.
The local.
Oh,
the local.
yeah.
Do consumers, are your customers interested in it? Do they ask you about it?
Yeah, of course. They ask about it, and everyone thinks they want local until it doesn't taste good, right? And just because it's local doesn't mean that it's better. So with almost 200 restaurants across the United States, it's really hard to say, yes, go out and source that locally, or even more difficult for us to take that responsibility and say, hey, we're going to go source local produce in each one of those markets. That's a huge undertaking. So we try and educate, not directly to the customer, but mostly we try and educate our teams and say, hey, look, you guys need to understand that when you get that question, know where your product is coming from, right? If it's tomato season in Florida, explain that we're buying tomatoes from Florida because they taste better right now, because it's a higher quality product. When we're using watermelon in our juices and different things like that. So in our juice program and our LTO program, we have a better opportunity to use some seasonal items. But on our regular menu, we have avocados on our menu every single day, and sometimes they're from California when they're good in California and it's growing season there, and sometimes they're from Mexico when it's growing season there. So I think a big piece of it is educating the teams, right? Our own teams internally, and like giving them the tools or the ability, I guess, to then communicate that to the customer.
Yeah, that makes sense. It sounds like it's about education of your internal teams, and then when you have access to social media or bloggers, making sure you're on message all the time.
Right.
So I'm saving some time for audience questions, so I hope you have some questions ready for this great panel. So who would like to start out and ask a question? We have a microphone here. Rich had his hand up first.
Okay, Shane, very refreshing local comments. I want to thank you for that because it's perfect common sense, and I don't hear that very often, so that was great. One thing I didn't hear you guys talk about and what your opinion is on GMOs. There's a lot of, Idaho has some new potatoes coming out right now that are really amazing products, and there's a few others. What do you believe your customers are? Are you concerned about it? Do you talk about it? Anything like that?
Well, you mentioned Idaho first, so maybe I can go first and be short. And, we support all the growers and shippers and processors in Idaho, and there is tremendous pushback from vocal groups on GMO. I think a lot of it has to do with the first potatoes that came out really all the advantages for the GMO potatoes at that time were to the parent company, Monsanto, and not necessarily to the growers, and certainly not to the audience of consumers or restaurant chains. And this time around, I think that Simplot and some of the others are going very slow and steady. There's a lot of benefits to it. You know, we have to stay neutral as a board, commission, or association, but there are a lot of benefits to it, especially when you look at something like doing fresh cut fries and not having the issues you might have with the Russell Burbank with black spot bruising. And some times in our seasons where we've run into that. There's some benefits in being able to, as they do the next generations, and they're only exploring those first 2 or 3, but as they do the next generations and are able to do potatoes that take less water, that can be can suppress some of the genes that cause issues with bugs and so on and so forth. Years ago, I heard somebody speak, and I thought this was just a great analogy. He said, you know, to growers, he was talking to them, and he said, you need to figure out who you're selling to. Are you selling to Walmart? You need to be very efficient. You need to be able to do it in quantity. You need to figure out, even at the lowest price, how you can make a profit. Or you're selling to Whole Foods, you need to be able to tell them where did that product come from, and you know what are all the things that are related to that. And then you need to figure out, okay, are we going to sell to the rest of the world? And I think that's kind of the situation that brought Simplot to the table, was to say it's important to be able to explore this and do this in the United States, but it's really important as a company that's involved internationally and especially involved with emerging nations, to figure out, is there a better way to do this so that that production, which quite often is too high in the United States, and so we have low produce prices, but the production in other countries, especially emerging countries, can be something that they can sustain themselves with.
How about for some of the operators, consumer concerns, perceptions, questions about GMOs? Shane?
Yeah, I mean, I think the questions are out there, but we aren't seeing a huge push forward, and we're not seeing a lot of our customers say, hey, we're not coming to First Watch because you haven't eliminated GMOs from your menu items. Also, for us, of course, we're talking about it internally, right? Is this the direction we need to head? And if it is the road that we're going to start going down, you know, how wide is that road? If you're going to say we're not going to use GMOs, then you better do that in every single product, because now you're going to use a non-GMO tomato or potato or something in a dish that has all the other ingredients contain GMOs. So, you know, when we get around the table and talk about those things, it's in our opinion kind of an all or nothing deal. And if it's an all deal, I mean, that's a completely different discussion that you're going to have to start having. We have the same talks about organic. You know, if we're going to go, should we go all the way, and should we try and find organic produce for 200 restaurants? Like, that's a huge challenge. So those are the conversations that we're having internally. So I don't think it's a decision we're making next week or next month or even next year, but it is on the table. You know, obviously the retail world is pushing that, and food service follows retail trends in many cases. So we're watching.
I do want to jump in with one thing for potatoes. To put things in perspective, this growing season we harvested 325,000 acres. 4,000 of those are Simplot's GMO white russets, and in Idaho is one of, I think, 4 or 6 states right now that they're testing that in. So it's still pretty early on, and they're getting a lot of feedback and monitoring, and they are doing a lot of social media monitoring with it, and they've run into sort of some of the same things that maybe you know, and it isn't this. I'm not making any judgments when I'm saying this. But it might be similar in some ways to what Steve was saying with the mushrooms, where if something works and it makes that burger moisture better, if someone, some people really want to know what's in that, and others just say, like Gerry was saying, oh, it tastes good, or it doesn't have bruises, or it does perform this way. So I think we kind of need to leave an open mind to some of it.
Anybody else want to tackle that one?
I've just a quick note. So a lot of consumers think that seedless watermelon are GMO. And so we kind of have this opposite problem of educating and being unbiased, like Don said. We're unbiased. If one day the watermelon industry has GMO watermelon, we'll support those as well. But trying to explain to a consumer what a naturally occurring hybrid is, they start to glaze over. We're trying to educate that it's not GMO. There's nothing wrong with GMOs. It's a naturally occurring hybrid. So the best thing that we can say right now is that a seedless watermelon is a mule. It's the same as a horse and a donkey, and it creates a mule. So, I think it's about making those messages approachable so that they don't glaze over, but so you kind of get a laugh out of some people, and they walk away knowing something that they didn't know before.
It's tough to make complicated issues simple. That's a good way to put it. Are there other questions from our audience? Is everybody getting worn out? It's been a great day. Well, I think we'll wrap up then. We have a question. Yay! I won't wrap up yet.
I had a question. We're talking about all the things that have worked really, really well in getting consumer buy-in. With your new MPD efforts, I suppose this question is geared mostly towards the operators. Have you had any situations where you've not gotten that customer buy-in? And then, what was the lesson that was learned there? Is it, the thing that prompted this question was the line in the statement, a health message on the menu used to mean a quick death. We all thought everyone wanted healthy menu items, but they just wanted to know that they were there. They didn't actually want to order them. So that's what prompted the question here.
I've having had the opportunity of working with several different organizations in various sizes, particularly when you're very advertising focused or TV focused. There's a lot of investment just in the cost of putting something on television. We don't do television at Hard Rock to any great degree, but certainly with other companies I've worked with, we have. And the kind of the rule there is you want to test heavily, fail early, fail fast. And that's what you look for, is just pretty rigorous, multi-layered consumer testing that that lets you see where your rejections are going to come up, or where things are really actually on a trend curve vis-a-vis the demographics you're targeting or your known consumer base. That's what we look for. With an organization like Hard Rock, I can put various options out there, and they may have done well in our first in beta testing, and if they're not working great in the restaurant, having chef teams in the restaurant, it's relatively easy for me to either make tweaks on it or to pull an item interim. But you do learn as much, I think, sometimes on the items that fail out as the items that go. I've put items back on a menu 5 years after they hit the wall, and they do really great. I mean, I remember doing things like harissa. I was playing around with harissa on some menus probably 10 years ago. Because when I was at Disney, one of the areas that I did special events for, I did a lot of Moroccan flavor profiles. So I incorporated a lot of those in, and when I went to other organizations, I was still familiar with those and started incorporating those into some of the testing and some of the ideation I was doing, and was not ready for it yet. but they worked their way back around, and you start to see them more. So it's you just, if you fail out an idea and you feel it's intrinsically a good idea, I think it's worthwhile to wait to either everyone catches up with you, or to things shift and it may become a good idea, or have more consumer acceptance later on.
Yeah, failure's a wonderful teacher sometimes.
Yeah.
Do you have
And
any
I
examples, Lenny?
agree totally with that. We always say if it's not for now, just put it back in the file. It's going to come out again. And that's the best thing about what we do, is nobody really gets hurt if we fail. We just take it off the menu and put something else back on.
Yeah, we rely on the testing process. I mean, that's a huge part of it, right? And to see what it does for us in 11 restaurants or 50 is way better to obviously have it fail there than to just say, hey, we really believe in this, let's go with it. And you put it in 200 restaurants, and then in 4 weeks, everyone's knocking on your door and sending you emails like, what are you thinking? Like, what happened? The recovery from that's really terrible. So, yeah, we rely heavily on that testing process, and we put a lot of value in what we learn there, and it's not all, roses and rainbows, right? Sometimes they don't work, and you learn from it, and maybe they're not ready for it now. They, meaning the customer's not ready for that, or it has components of something you think is great. We did a quinoa wrap, and we have 2 very successful quinoa power bowls on our menu. They've been really great to us, and we were like, yeah, let's put that in a wrap. Everyone's gonna love it. No one loved it at all. But you have to see what you're doing at the same time. We also rolled avocado toast at the same time. So we thought all these people who were maybe ordering vegetable burgers are gonna go to this quinoa wrap because it's kind of veg-centric and it's quinoa, so of course they're gonna love it. And they didn't. They went to avocado toast all day long. So you learn lessons, and I don't know, that's part of the game. That's part of the fun, I think.
Anybody else? Gone. Okay. Please join me in thanking this great panel.